Hey folks, this is Rhykker with a Diablo and Overwatch news wrap-up video where we give our thoughts on the happenings of the week. This is our 11th episode in this series, so if you've missed any previous episodes, be sure to check those out and make sure you have your subscription notifications turned on. As usual, we'll start with Diablo news, so if you're just here for Overwatch, skip ahead to the time indicated above. So the big topic that I want to talk about this week for Diablo is the Druid. Blizzard has potentially given us a teaser that the Druid will be announced at BlizzCon 2017. We'll discuss what that teaser is and we'll see whether we believe it or not. So basically, ever since the Necromancer was announced, people have been thinking that the Druid would come next. This has been a personal belief of mine. My belief was that if a Necromancer pack proved successful, a second character pack would be released for Diablo 3, and a safe bet would be the Druid, or some shapeshifting class like the Druid. After the Necromancer, the Druid is the next most desired class from Diablo 2 that people want to see come to Diablo 3, and shapeshifting is a mechanic that has not been tackled at all in Diablo 3 outside of Archon and that kind of stuff, but like a proper shape-shifting sort of werewolf, werebear kind of thing. And to make it distinct enough from the Archon modes of Diablo 3, you can even have it as a toggle switch where you're permanently inside your alternate form. So there definitely is a lot of room for a shape-shifting mechanic in the game that hasn't been tackled at all. And the only reason I think that they might not have it as a Druid specifically, but as something like a Druid, is just that the team has expressed some desire to kind of make their own class. But if it is a shapeshifter, we're probably all going to call the Druid anyway, so they likely aren't going to go too far from Druid. But here's the thing, we had no proof in any way whatsoever that the Druid would be coming. Yes, there were teasers introduced. There's sort of like in-game lore pointing towards Druids ever since the latest regions added after Kanai's Cube and the monsters, and there were kind of clues bringing us towards Druid lore, but that's a far cry from a confirmation that the Druid would be a coming playable class. Well, now on the test server, Blizzard introduced a set of wings that directly references Druids. The wings you get for completing Season 12 are the Fiacla Gear, and the description reads, "Don't let a Druid see you wearing these wings, as they may think you killed one of their brethren." And it goes beyond just the mention of Druid in the description. Fiacla Gear is a figure in Diablo lore, on the same order as Bolcathos. In fact, Bolcathos and Fiacla Gear were brothers, be it literally or figuratively, and Barbarian and Druid lore is actually tied together pretty tightly if you dial it back far enough. These two brothers basically had some different worldviews, but otherwise they all worshiped the ancients. Druids and barbarians all worshiped the ancients, but Fiacla Gear believed in a more spiritual path, whereas Bolcathos went the martial way. So Fiacla Gear was effectively the first Druid. He took a series of recruits and went to go form his little cult in the forests, founded the Order of Druids, and here we are today. Fiacla Gear is actually Old Irish for sharp teeth, a reference to shapeshifting into a wolf or bear, or I guess any animal really. Do beavers have sharp teeth? I guess so. I guess you would call their, it's not canines, but they're still sharp. But anyway, it goes even deeper than that, because if you look at the wings, this is a pair of 6 wings. So effectively 3 pairs of wings. The very first time we saw them was when they were data mined after patch 2.4. We knew that these assets were in the game, and then it was at BlizzCon 2016 last year that they were officially shown and referenced. And this is what was said.
PC players, these are the Seraphim wings from an upcoming season. So this will be the first time you'll see those, and I won't say which season they're coming in, but you'll find out soon. So
the first time Blizzard officially referenced these wings, they called them the Seraphim wings. And even if you know nothing about Diablo, if you know something about, I guess, real-world lore, you would know that a seraph, or seraphim plural, these are angels with 6 wings. So if you were to see, even with no knowledge of Diablo, if you would see these wings, the thing that would probably come to mind is, oh, those are seraphim wings. And we have confirmation that Blizzard used to call them seraphim wings. And they could have released them as seraphim wings. It would have made more sense, because what do these wings even have to do with Druids? What I'm seeing here is Blizzard deciding that they want to include a reference to Druids and saying, okay, look through our wings, find a pair of Druid wings. And the artists are like, no, we got nothing. Nothing looks like Druid wings. And they're like, just pick whatever's the closest. Feathers? I guess that's natural, that animals have feathers. Go with it. Roll with it. So I feel that we're looking at wings that were never intended to be Druid wings. Wings that would have otherwise launched as Seraphim wings and no one would have batted an eye. But Blizzard deliberately, right before BlizzCon, on the test server, decides to put a Druid reference in here, name them after the first Druid. Why? The way I see it, there's only three possibilities here. Either this is a deliberate teaser for the Druid, or Blizzard just wanted to put in some Druid references and didn't consider or realize that we could consider this a teaser, or three, Blizzard deliberately put this to either misdirect us or just mess around with us, knowing that we would think it's a teaser and would then be disappointed. And that's what doesn't make sense to me. That's why neither of those other two options make that much sense to me. Why would Blizzard deliberately upset us? Why would they hype us only to disappoint? Unless they have something else to show us that's gonna get us excited. But if they have nothing to show, then why put in a teaser? Upsetting us in the past generally hasn't worked out so well. Blizzard's been pretty deliberately trying to avoid overhyping us for things over the past year, ever since some disappointments in the past. And also because of that, I find it unlikely that Blizzard wouldn't realize that we would consider this to be a teaser. So I need to specify here, I do not believe this is confirmation that we're getting a Druid, but it does seem to point towards this being a teaser. But what do you folks think? Is this a teaser? Are we gonna get the Druid? Or is Blizzard just messing with us? Or do they just not even realize you would get hyped about this? Moving on, a quick bit of Diablo news. Next week, we should have a new patch hitting the test server. I look forward to seeing what new balance changes or whatever changes might come with it. On to our community complaint corner. What are we complaining about this week? Blackthorns. Why won't Blizzard either just remove Blackthorns altogether, or make it useful, or just make it a craftable item so that we don't get it as a drop? It's funny because ever since Reaper of Souls, as far back as the start of Reaper of Souls, I could remember lamenting finding Blackthorns. And it was even more common to get Blackthorns back then. Now, this does bring up some debate though. Basically, it leads to a slippery slope. The desire to remove Blackthorns seems to be, I want every item I get to be good. And if we only have good drops, then it kind of cheapens the experience of a loot hunt. Getting bad loot is what makes getting good loot feel that much more rewarding, and some people feel that, well, if we start doing stuff like taking out Blackthorns, then we're gonna eventually get to a point where, we're only gonna get loot that we want, and the game's gonna become less fun. I'm not 100% sure how to feel about this, but I think I begrudgingly have to say that having Blackthorns just be that set that no one wants is good for the game. You know, I'm thinking about it now, and when I get a green amulet to drop, I get that moment of excitement where I'm not sure whether it's gonna be that Traveler's Pledge that I've been looking for, or a friggin' Blackthorns. So if there is no other choice, if it's Traveler's Pledge or nothing because I'm playing a Barbarian or a Demon Hunter or a Witch Doctor or a Necromancer, then it definitely would feel less exciting to get confirmation that it is a Traveler's Pledge. It's already not very difficult to put together all the pieces you need for a set. I'm not sure that making it even easier by removing Blackthorns would make the game more fun. It comes down to the psychological principle of the contrast effect. If you get a bad piece of loot and then a good piece of loot, that good piece of loot seems even better than if you'd gone a good piece of loot and then another good piece of loot. The turds make the diamonds seem to shine brighter by contrast. Well, what are your thoughts on this? Now, as we move into Overwatch, I'm going to note that we're going to start with a discussion about toxicity in gaming, and even if you're not an Overwatch player, you can still appreciate this discussion. So the first bit of Overwatch news comes off the tail of last week's story about that individual who, over the course of the entirety of Overwatch, since Overwatch was released, he accumulated over 2,000 reports. People reported him over 2,200 times. And after a buildup of punishments that involved just silencing him so he couldn't be toxic in chat, he was silenced for well over a year. he still managed to continue to be toxic enough to accumulate more and more and more reports, and his punishment at the end of everything was 1 week's suspension. And this has just led into a greater discussion about toxicity in the game in general, and this week the community has been complaining quite a bit, or at least trying to bring attention that Blizzard needs to do something more to address toxicity in its community. And this is what brings us into our greater discussion about toxicity in games in general. Now, last week a few of you had the opinion that, hey, these people paid for their game, they should be allowed to play it however they want. If they want to mouth off at people, that's their right. They paid money for this game. And I could see the basis of the argument there. It's the same basis that I feel that if I go buy a game, that if I want to use cheat codes, if I want to use mods, if I want to use a trainer, if I want to modify the game files, it's my property, I should be allowed to do that. If I go buy a chair from a store, then I should be allowed to sit in it however I want. I'm not going to have the creator of the chair or the store owner dictate to me, no, you can't sit in your chair like this, you must sit like this. But here's the thing, my argument only extends to single-player games. As soon as we get into a multiplayer environment, as soon as your actions can affect other people, that's when things change. The analogy of owning a piece of property no longer applies. When you buy a multiplayer game like Overwatch, you are not purchasing a product. What you are doing is effectively purchasing a lifetime pass to use the product. The better analogy is an amusement park. And even if you have a lifetime pass to an amusement park, if you go around mouthing off at the top of your lungs, if you're sexist and homophobic, if you're just a general a-hole, then people will eventually complain enough that security is going to escort you out of the park. And if you come back the next day and keep behaving this way, at some point, you're gonna get banned. Purchasing your lifetime pass gives you the right to use the facilities as intended and as governed by the managers. It does not buy you the right to be a jackass. But here's the thing, it falls to the administration and the managers of the amusement park to police customers, to escort customers out when they're being toxic to the rest of the customers. It is up to management to determine when one customer is having a negative impact on the entirety of the experience, when one customer is making it so that other people are not getting their money's worth. And historically, video game devs have been very lax in their dealing with toxicity, which brings us to the situation we're in today with a lot of games in which they are very toxic. For most of us, this is just ingrained in our culture. We're used to it. You play an online game and, hey, but it's the virtual world. This isn't the real world. You wouldn't see people behave like this in the real world, but you just accept it in the virtual space because it's always been like this and it'll always be like this, right? But it doesn't have to be. The line between the real world and the virtual world with every passing year continues to blur. Death threats issued online are taken more seriously now. Government is catching up and starting to implement repercussions for things that you say and do in virtual space. Just because the virtual world has been the wild, wild west historically doesn't mean it should continue to be so, or that it's even good that it continues to be so. When this virtual world first emerged, it was escapism for us, and that's why a lot of people use it as an outlet to vent things that they couldn't otherwise do in real life. And all of us are guilty of being trolls at some point or another, I'm sure. I've done that my share in my adolescence. You know, as a kid, my friends saw me as the lawful good one, but going into the virtual world, I did some scummy things, I did some trolly things, because it felt like this free world with no rules and just pure escapism. But that's not the world that we're living in today. And now children are being raised with the virtual world being a part of their real life. It's no longer something that you sometimes escape to. It's an ever-present part of our lives. And that's why we have a generation now where the difference between virtual and real is almost non-existent. So if these kids are learning that it's okay to be toxic in the virtual world, they're not going to have that same off switch for the real world. And for them, things that happen in the virtual world aren't as compartmentalized as it was in the past. Things feel more meaningful now. We're no longer just anonymous aliases. Now, our entire lives are being tracked in this virtual world. When my girlfriend was interviewing for her current job, her would-be employers went so far as to track down her battle tag and learn that she was a Torbjorn main. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that the entirety of the virtual world needs to be regulated. We still do need those anonymous places, but it should now be an option to go there. When someone spends their hard-earned money on visiting an amusement park, there's a certain expectation that the other customers there aren't going to treat them like garbage. They're expecting to not be bullied or yelled at. They're expecting that the other customers won't be actively doing things to prevent them from having fun. So why don't we have this same expectation for a video game? Because that's just the way things have been. We can do better. And as much as I would love to say it all starts with us, the players, and in a sense that is true, it ultimately falls to the managers of the amusement park to kick out, to ban the people who are being toxic, who are making the experience less enjoyable for the paying customers that are respectful. But what do you folks think? Do you think Blizzard needs to be harsher on toxicity? Do you think we should all just accept it, that we're overreacting? Do you enjoy being toxic to others? Sound off in the comments. And to finish off with a couple quick pieces of Overwatch news, this week we had the release of a new comic, Wasteland, about Roadhog and Junkrat. We don't learn a whole lot of new lore, but we do get some nice insight into Roadhog. Dude's a lot smarter than he lets on. Blizzard also released a video on the making of the May cinematic. Great insight there if you want a behind the scenes look at that. And our last bit of news, speaking of toxicity, a 17-year-old Overwatch pro player named Sinatra just got signed for $150,000. And that's salary, that's before any tournament winnings. A lot of money is going into Overwatch esports. Now Sinatra has a bit of a reputation for being toxic, but apparently he's been getting better ever since he's been having more spotlight shone on him. But $150,000 salary. I think a lot of us are considering becoming a pro esports player now. And that wraps up this week's video. Remember to leave a comment with your thoughts on any and every story that we've covered. Also, real quick, if you would like to get your name on the Rhykker Raiders 2017 t-shirt, you have until the end of September. Follow the link in the description below. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Twitch and Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykker Raiders for more Diablo and Overwatch content.